Hey y'all, here are OS Reviews. In the early 2000s, all the way up to really the 2010s, before smartphones exploded in popularity, consumer-grade camcorders for recording video, as well as point-and-shoot digital cameras were actually quite popular. But of course, this category eventually became cannibalized by smartphones as mobile photography became more and more powerful, and people didn't really see a need to carry a separate device for that anymore, unless you were really a pro photographer or videographer. Then you would often look to larger, even more powerful equipment, but that would be more costly. So this is a category that we really don't see quite often anymore, but today we're taking a look at essentially a modernized version. Granted, pretty much all of the major players in this space have quit, including brands like Sony, Panasonic, JVC, a lot of those Japanese brands making those recorders previously, since this is not really a market that exists too frequently anymore. So the model here is going to be a lot more generic, but it does claim to have 5K resolution. Perhaps part of that will be a little upscaled digitally, but we'll have to find out later on in this video. And it does come with, interestingly, Wi-Fi built on in, which means that you can connect it wirelessly to your smartphone and have a larger screen view, or if you want to capture something remotely from further away, you can do that. So there are a few modern touches on board. Perhaps we're more easily sharing those files onto social media via that wireless connection. It does have a pretty conventional design otherwise with a touchscreen on board, and this is what it typically looks like. There's a few extra modules that you can snap on, which includes a boom microphone as well as this shell for the lens part that doesn't really do anything, but just makes it look a little bit more professional. You have to pop in your own memory card. One is not included, and it records up to 5K 30 FPS and will also capture still images at 48 megapixels. You can also capture 4K at 30 FPS, although for 60 FPS footage you have to scale down to 1080p. Claims to even have IR night vision built on it as well, which is kind of impressive. You can think of this as essentially a home security camera, which has a slightly higher quality sensor and a built-in screen in this camcorder form. So that does mean, unfortunately, there is no real optical zoom on board, which is one of the larger selling points of those older traditional camcorders, is that you can get up close using something like 40 or even 80 times optical magnification, and it didn't really reduce the quality of the results. By contrast, this thing only has digital magnification. So if you are looking for a camcorder for getting super close to faraway shots, I will say immediately that this model is probably not going to be appropriate for those cases. But if you are capturing mostly landscape type shots or just vlogging in general, that might be okay. There is EIS on board as well. It can also be used as a webcam even if you're connecting it to your computer. At least one benefit here is that the price point is quite low. This thing actually sells for only around $130 here during the holiday season. So you can think of this as being more of a toy more than anything super professional. Of course, that is going to be a giveaway there with that price point, but let's take a closer look at how it performs. In the packaging, aside from the camera itself and also a soft carrying case, you also get the aforementioned detachable kind of boom style microphone. This will clamp onto the top of the camcorder and also has a few additional controls, including increasing the gain, sensitivity, and also has, of course, this foam that will prevent some of the wind as well as popping sounds from being picked up. You also get the remote control, which takes two AAA batteries you can use to, again, control some of the settings if you're further away using IR. There's also a bundled HDMI cable if you want to link this up to a larger TV or display for looking back at the footage. And there are two battery packs included, which is actually a pretty neat extra. So you can charge one up and take with you when on the road. By the way, one battery will last for around 90 minutes of video recording, so about an hour and a half, meaning that with both battery packs, you're getting around 3 hours of footage when on the road, which is okay, but it's not going to be extremely long either. You do have just a quick user guide as well as a microfiber cloth, and then finally some of the optional attachments that you can pop on there to make it look more professional can also be done there. Some accents here are primarily made out of plastic, so this is truly optional. In fact, in my opinion, I want to carry something a little bit more lightweight with me, so I probably won't snap it on. But what is kind of useful is this handlebar accessory. It uses a standard threaded tripod mount to attach onto the camera, and then you can carry it around as well as get a little bit lower, maybe to a floor level without having to stoop quite as low or bend down to capture those shots. And now just a closer look at the camera. From a design perspective, it definitely looks like a much more expensive model from yesteryear. Although it is made predominantly out of a polycarbonate plastic, it actually has a decent weight to it and some metal accents on here as well. Otherwise, on the very top, you'll find just the digital zoom controls. There's a key to instantly snap a photo as well as go into more advanced menu. Like older devices of yesteryear, you'll find that the battery here is on the bottom that you can then snap in and out just by removing the latch there. Also, the grip here is pre-attached, making it quite comfortable to hold as you're shooting footage, with the record key here on the edge as well that you can begin and stop a recording, very similar to other models that we've seen in the past. And on the very bottom here, there's also the full SD card slot, as well as a standard tripod thread. You'll also find access to a lens cover that is included, so this is something that you can then pop on to prevent any dust from getting attached or smudging up the lens, although there is no, again, optical zoom capabilities, so all of the 16 times being mentioned here is going to be done digitally. When you flip open the camera here, it will automatically turn on. The screen here is IPS LCD. It is a capacitive touchscreen, thankfully, so fairly responsive and measures 3 inches diagonally. Viewing angles at the very least don't seem to be problematic, and even brightness seems to be adequate. So the screen at least isn't quite as low grade as past generic cameras that we've seen on the market. This part is actually done decently. You can rotate it actually all the way around and flip it down like this if you want a different angle, or if you're sharing it, for example, or shooting at a different angle, you can still position and see what you're looking at. On the inside here, you also get another compartment for the Type-C port used for charging. Great to see this as a standard I/O, as well as the 3.5mm port for external microphones that you can pop in, as well as the HDMI port. The very top here also features some manual controls for power, as well as going up and down if you are navigating the UI and you prefer this to the touchscreen. And last but not least, located on the display here on the front is actually the IR/LED light bulb that can illuminate subjects slightly better in the dark if you're recording content, although it's still not super recommended, to be completely honest, because the sensor size is still rather entry level and it's not going to fare super well under really low light conditions. However, the IR mode does turn everything black and white, again similar to a home security camera. At least you can kind of make out what is going on. So from a hardware perspective, I think it does get relatively close to models that we've seen in the past. Last but not least, this is the module where you can use to attach the microphone into just by clamping it there, and by default it does have a built-in mic of its own, but it's not going to be the highest quality, which is why you can use additional ones if desired. And now taking just a quick look at the UI here, it is relatively simple. You can see the current resolution mode that you're shooting at, 5K 30 FPS, whether EIS is currently being turned on, and you can also tap once to bring up additional controls, including playing back any content that you have recorded already or jumping into more advanced settings. From here you can also add features including the timestamp option, turn on Wi-Fi if you want to connect it to the companion app, which we'll see here in a moment, and other things including the light frequency. You can also change from 50 versus 60 Hertz, that's the refresh rate, and you can also change things like the white balance and metering controls here as well. So it's not the most advanced thing that we've seen in the world, especially if you are comparing it with older models from companies like JVC, Panasonic. They may have more granular controls there, but the basics can be done here, and it's at least relatively responsive as you're using this simple UI. Now, if we swipe left and right on the screen here, it actually switches into the camera mode instead. So now if we jump into settings, all of the controls will correlate to photo taking instead, including the ISO, as well as the exposure compensation. A couple of final controls here, we can actually tap on the up key here once to manually switch into the IR, aka night vision mode. You can see the IR bulbs here visible only to the camera lens, not in person, and you can still see subjects here in the dark. Again, very similar to a home security camera, and I can tap on it again to go back into the regular color mode. So overall, the UI is extremely simple, and it's very easy to just begin recording, as well as tap again just to stop, that anyone can really pick up and begin shooting with. That was kind of the beauty of camcorders of yesteryear. Let's actually take a closer look at some of the sample footage quality next. So as shown from the sample footage, overall quality is decent, I would say. It's kind of expected from a $100 camera. However, the resolution is at least a little bit better than, again, past generation models. Even if there is a bit of digital upscaling, at least you are able to still see plenty of fine details, and if you're just using it for casual vlogging purposes, it can be alright, kind of like an alternative to something like an action camera. So anyways, in terms of the Wi-Fi connection, Your phone needs to then connect to the camera. It has its own basically hotspot. You enter the default password that gets shown, and then you'll be able to then see it once you jump into the application here. Interestingly, in the Wi-Fi mode, the camera itself will not be showing anything on its display. So you don't get dual viewfinders from here as well as on the phone. It is only on the phone if you're in the mode. If you tap on exit, it actually will turn off the Wi-Fi to conserve on power. So it actually then severs the connection. But as aforementioned, this basically becomes a home security camera-esque experience. You can see what the camera here is pointing at. There will be a momentary delay, but it's not too bad in terms of latency, I would say. And you're able to begin recording as well as jump into your gallery. Take a look at the battery percentage as well as the Wi-Fi reception strength, and also jump into slightly more advanced settings, including the resolution, white balance, timestamp that we all talked about previously. Of course, you're also able to turn your phone sideways to get a more landscape view of what you're looking at. And by the way, this is the example of the digital magnification there happening. At least there's a little bit of software smoothing that helps to make the process just seem a little bit more steady as you're zooming in and out. But again, it's all done digitally in this case. Last but not least, a bar here on the side can be tapped to switch into taking photos, as well as recording in the IR night vision mode instead. So it is still easy enough to toggle between those different profiles. So the application as a whole, it's very simple, doesn't give us too much frills or extras, but at the very least it is quite steady in terms of quickly connecting to the camera and does seem to work all right. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of this generic 5K, quote-unquote, based camcorder, which is really using a retro design of yesteryear and just having a few more modern touches. As a whole, it makes me kind of nostalgic, and I would say if you are thinking of this as an alternative to something like an action cam, it might be an okay option. That being said, don't expect miracles, especially if you are looking for real optical zoom. You will want to look elsewhere, but certainly does have a few interesting use cases and also plenty of accessories included in the box. A little bit more ergonomic for holding as you're recording content, as well as if you want kind of the remote capabilities of seeing the display on your phone. That can be certainly an application to consider. So you can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews, kind of an interesting look at a 2023 camcorder